This time we'll not put that music. There's something wrong with it. Welcome to all to this episode of ENFRA show. We have amongst us Shri Manoj, Lieutenant Colonel Manoj Channan, who is a defense veteran of repute. We had him in our last episode as well. Along with joining us is Shri R.N. Khazanchi. He is DRUK THUKSEY. That is the highest civilian honor of Bhutan. He has spent time in Bhutan, and he is originally a Kashmiri man who loves his Kashmir issues very deeply. And also he has been awarded the presidential honor at the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. About 2020, he received this award. We have K. Srikumar, who is a man from the defense technology area. K. Srikumar was also there in our last program. And we have PVS Murthy, our public expert and public cost person, who always joins us on this program. Welcome to all of you, sir. So today, in this episode, I want to put up the question to Manoj Channan Saab regarding this Ordnance Factory Board and what the government has done, that is, made a decision to make 7 entities out of it under the corporatization theme. So the fact of the matter is that whoever is connected with the defense sector is well aware that these 41 factories remain India's and probably the world's only decentralized manufacturing setup. And in that sense, to do anything with it needed a lot of thought, and to make 7 entities out of it under corporatization. Are we moving towards the objective of privatization? Because nobody understands what this corporatization is all about. Because defense setup itself is a very professional setup, one of the most professional setups in the country. Yes, they have resource issues, they have timeline issues, they have issues related to challenges faced with technology integration, and those kind of things keep coming. But overall, the OFBs are a very fine setup, and they have brought a lot of technologies to India, including one technology which I got access to when I went in 2019 April to Chennai at the DefExpo, was the Pinaka system. So this is just one example, but they've done so many things for the country. They make from night vision devices to attire to, I would say, even artillery. So to that extent, they have been doing the work. So Channan Saab, the first thing is, let us understand what this Defense Ordnance Factory Board structure is all about, how these 41 decentralized factories actually function, and how they were probably the finest, I would say, decentralized setup in the world. Channan Saab.
Thank you all. Good afternoon to you. And to answer Professor Iyer's question, we have to go back a little bit back into the history. You see, when the Ordnance Factory Board factories were set up, we were part of the British India government, and the Indian troops were actively involved in World War II as well. They needed an industry which would support their war effort. Ordnance Factory Board factories were set up, and it was not only with a view to supply the logistical aspects which go into war making, but it was also with the fact that in rural India, there was an effort to set up townships which would provide all the ancillary requirements in terms of education, employment, healthcare, which sort of helped create these townships over the years. But then, as any other organization, they continued to perform, but they also had shortcomings. And the recent decision by the government on 16th of June to restructure this into 7 segments or sector-specific clusters, which are basically ammunition and explosives group under the ammunition and explosives, vehicles group for defense mobility and combat vehicles, weapons and equipment group for small arms, medium and large caliber guns, group comfort items group, optoelectronics group, and the parachute group. Now, what led to this decision is that the Indian Army, the primary user of OFP products, has highlighted time and again the poor quality, which was causing a lot of distress and loss of life too. So certain figures that have been mentioned in a document of 2014 First is the faulty ammunition causing accidents and losses worth around INR 960 crores. Slow development and production timelines of ordnance factories resulting in delayed operational readiness. Reportedly high cost of products. Fact that 75% of ordnance factory production is based on imported technology. Moreover, it was essential for the 246-year-old behemoth umbrella entity to be broken down for easy management and focused and efficient performance. And it is well understood that will take a while to come. But as said, well, while never late, it is better, but still better late than never is good enough. What we need to understand is that this restructuring is definitely something which is towards the privatization, which is the focus of the present government. And towards that end, what they have done is that they want that each of these 7 segments that have been created will have an independent board and decision making. They will be able to, it sort of decentralizes them from the clutches of the Ordnance Factory Board headquarters in Delhi or at Calcutta. And though some resistance has been there from the workers in the last couple of days, there have been reports in the newspapers that they have decided to go on a strike for a rollback. But I don't think the government is really going to fall into that trap, and they will have to manage that the strike doesn't take place and the workers do not shut down shop. What is being assumed, that is what the government has been trying to do with some of the strategic assets in terms of workshop, armed forces based workshops, in which it wanted that it should be government owned and company operated kind of a model. Now, this so far has not really taken off because the losses are tremendous and the revenue stream is a little restricted. So what could be afforded under a government entity is not therefore a very viable project when a private entity looks at it. Now, let me give you a small example. If you're talking about arms or in particular ammunition. Now, ammunition, while it is manufactured under stringent conditions, tested, stored, and issued to the army. However, while carrying out normal training or during operational requirements, if an ammunition doesn't function well or has a premature detonation, the ammunition is issued out as a lot. So it has a lot number. The complete lot of ammunition is segregated until the investigation is carried out and found out as to what is wrong with the ammunition. It is kept aside, and if required, that entire ammunition is destroyed. Now, this was something which was not challenged when it was under the government control, but imagine this to be under a private sector company. It has manufactured millions of rounds. It has issued them to the army. It has self-certified it that they're perfectly all right. But under operational conditions, when a couple of rounds don't perform, the ammunition is segregated and it is destroyed. Who bears the loss? That is something which we need to think about. Overall, in 2017 or so, there was a major seminar which was conducted by the Ordnance Factory Board, in which the focus was that at that time, that these 41 factories would become centers of excellence, and they would invite private parties to come in and participate, be a party or a partner with them, bring in the best of the management techniques, operational management in terms of ensuring that there are no losses. Well, all that seemed very nice when discussed during a seminar. However, subsequently, not much progress was made, and now it seems that the only way to do it is by forcing it top down. On the other hand, having been to some of these PSUs, whether it's the small arms ammunition factory at Warangaon in Maharashtra, or to the HAL plants in Bengaluru or Korawar or Lucknow, you find that they have some of the best machinery available. But the mindset of the worker is something which cannot be changed because he knows it's a vote bank, and the politician at some point will sort of fall into their requirements of the vote bank as we understand, and they will know that they will not be challenged. Even today, with the new changes that have been brought into place, the defense minister has reassured all workers that the service conditions for them will not change. If the service conditions don't change, this entire exercise that the government wants to undertake needs to be through. And it is also buying time for itself by saying that, there are no change in service conditions, but it may well take a decision after the elections of 2024. That's my view at the moment of what you asked for.
Unmute, Professor, yourself. Unmute.
We can't hear you. Please unmute.
Can you hear me? So I'm saying that basically what Lieutenant Colonel Channan Saab has said is, he has more or less said that he would like to go with what the government has made a decision at this point of time. And this decision is in the best interest of the defense setup, because probably what Channan Saab meant, if Channan Saab can correct me, is more or less it's looking at a professionalization of the factories, and there will be nothing more than that. It may not be full-fledged privatization at the end of the day. Can I take that, sir?
No, I think some sort of a privatization will occur because they would want they would want the regular part of the government. You see, Ordnance Factory Board has a cadre of itself. I suspect that they want to do away with the Ordnance Factory Board cadre. They want that to be replaced by professionals that come in from the industry. They have also mentioned that they would probably have, like if you look at the Kalashnikov factory set up at Amethi, now that has been put under a charge of a Major General. Okay. A retired Major General, and that is to ensure that efficiencies are maintained and a sort of a military-like precision is sort of established. While the thought is very noble, but to implement it in a civilian environment without the strict discipline of the armed forces, not really feasible.
Okay, so overall, what I can get from this is that overall you have said that this step is a good step. It's a right step of the government. Okay.
That's
so
right.
Khazanchi Saab, now what Channan Saab, who comes from the forces himself, he has said that this is a good step. But I want your view on this issue, because you have been a public sector man, and you know precisely how the public sector functions and how it delivers. And we have examples of the Hindustan Aeronautics. We have the examples of the Bharat Dynamics and such companies doing great work, although they are public sector. So here, I think the corporatization issue is just short of being a PSU. It is more like what Channan Saab said, that a kind of a part privatization procedure that is started, because there is no experience of the OFBs of even operating as a PSU. So what is your view?
I say, I have, telling you honestly, I support public sector.
Right.
And especially at this juncture of our history, when we have two great neighbors with all their intentions on our head and all the confusion they try to create through their terrorism acts in Kashmir and yes, outside also. So what I could see from Colonel Saab, his opinion is is wonderful in the sense that these factories may not be performing the way they should.
Yes.
I could see the quality and also then the financial performance also. Yes.
Right.
So what I would like to say is, when he says a very disciplined general is put to be looking after a factory, it doesn't mean really that he cannot handle it.
Right.
Or you need to replace him by somebody who comes from typically with a management background and starts doing it. I don't think, because I have my personal experience of NHPC, where one time we had a general who was heading it as the chairman managing director. And that was the time when we really took off. I'm talking
Right.
of NHPC. And
Right.
so it again depends on the person who is selected. It depends on what management, whether we call it ordinance board, or we have a public sector board, or then we privatize it and have a private sector board. It again depends on the quality of people who will be handling it. There
Right.
must be a change, as you said, and as the colonel has supported. And according to him, going for this alternative, as is known to everybody, 41 individual entities becoming 7, getting clubbed properly. Yes, I can see 7 is okay for how they are grouped. But question is, how will they be managed? It will be again the same thing. If it's the same people, when it comes to workers, how do they become effective and productive? Is when you have a management, a proper management who looks after their interests and looks after the sectors, interests. So according to me, it could be a good change. Why not? And as he said, timeline also, he has put it perhaps post 24 elections. Okay, that gives a lot of time to rethink and perhaps even do some fine tuning. But according to me, it should not go to private sector ultimately. Public sector, but efficient one. We have our own experience. To go to private sector I know of energy sector, where people are doing exceedingly well, some of them. So again, it will depend on who is there to handle it and how much the government supports. And
Right.
again, that
So
normally we say the interference of government and all, that should not be there. Yes. But according to me, yes, it should be, especially when it comes to investments. Investment with any private, whether he's a partner or he owns it fully, will not be in the interest of the defense, at least at this stage. I don't see it in near future, in next years, 10 years, because our private sector also is not perhaps still prepared for things like this. They may not actually realize the importance of the product. As the colonel was telling us, then the entire lot is to be then rejected. That they will not appreciate. It's only, do you think that if we need to this a penalty on them, we'll set it right? No, they will wind up the shop and go away. So ideal is a public sector, properly managed, professional people, and especially with military background, defense background, and who are trained. They can be given trainings at different levels. The technology can be brought through them, better disciplined people, and naturally then the workers will behave. It will not be our public sector, high public sector. No. Then in that case, they will behave.
No, we have very good example. We have very good example of the Goa Shipyard Limited, which I have seen. Also HL in that way, other than a little bit of, I would say, inability to deliver in time. But otherwise, HL has also done a great job. So Goa Shipyard Limited has done a great job. So I think you have a point over there, that whether you should convert this into professionally managed public sector enterprises. Now, that very question, I want to throw to Srikumar before we go back to Colonel and then go to Murthy Saab because I want Colonel Saab also to come in with what Khazanchi Saab has said. But a quick coming in of Srikumar on this issue.
Yeah, I'm in sync with Lieutenant Colonel Manoj as well as Khazanchi Saab. And maybe I'll just, go back into history where the political scenario in the 50s and 60s determined a sort of a socialist model, which, the first few governments have implemented. And what should have happened is there should have been a natural evolution as per the changing global scenario. Now, possibly that is not what happened. The start was good, but the upgradation and keeping in pace with the global developments did not happen because it was absolutely not professionally managed. What was applicable in the 70s and 80s may not be applicable in the 2000s. So there has to be I should say, a total change in the way the public sector is managed. And I also feel that India is not really ready for defense privatization at this point of time, given the fact of there is a huge population below poverty line and trade unionism and other things. And apart from that, as Khazanchi Saab said, that the private mindset may not be ready to take on such a total responsibility. Okay, and apart from that, this issues of trade unionism, which percolates into all public sectors, seems to be a big bottleneck that is preventing its evolution into very I should say effective and state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. Now, if you take USA, the education levels are high, and the corporates abide by the government rules. Now, it may not happen in India that way because given the fact that what we have seen in the recent few decades, how corporates themselves violate certain norms. Now, this is all because of the existing psychological atmosphere in the country, because we are not a first world country in terms of economy. So I think privatization should happen eventually, but not at this junction. That is my personal point of view.
Yeah, so what you rightly said, because we probably are a transitional economy. The best definition that can come to India is neither it's no more a developing economy. Of course, it's a little bit ahead of developing economy. And there's something in between called the transitional economy. And it's a very tough time for a transitional economy. It's been a long path to transition because I think we took more than a decade now to transit, from our zone of developing to developed. So I think this is a very, very complex scenario because we are probably not mentally prepared to accept this. But yes, government has pushed this agenda. I want to go back to Channan Saab before I come to Murthy Saab on this. Channan Saab, now you have heard the views of Khazanchi Saab and also Srikumar, one coming from the public sector, and Sri literally now like a private sector man. So what is your take on these two views? They are saying that it should not be in a full sense privatization, but it could be for more of a professionalization scenario. Channan Saab, do we have it?
Please unmute, sir. Unmute yourself.
Channan Saab.
Channan Saab has to unmute.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that having heard both the speakers right now, my own view is some course correction also want to give. When I said when the general is heading PSU, it's not that he's not qualified. We have courses which are done at the College of Defense Management at Hyderabad, in which people earn their MBAs from the Osmania University, and they do interact with the civil industry over a period of a year before they get their degree. And likewise, the examples given of the Goa shipyards and all are very good for examples, and people from the Navy who have gone and commanded these shipyards have also ensured that the delivery has always been on time. There is something which has to be seen in a little larger prospect, which is not totally above board, and it's in the area of gray. If you permit, I'll definitely speak about it. You see, there is all arms deals, ammunition deals are cash-rich deals. We all understand it.
Yes.
Every time a round is fired, it is stated in the people by the people who are in the defense sector that certain people make a buck out of it. So it's not easy when you say that you will immediately move away from a government sector to private. That is one. Secondly, notwithstanding the fact that we have so much of ammunition being made within the country, we still import a lot of ammunition. What we make is small caliber ammunition, which is less than 0.50 mm. The higher caliber ammunition of artillery and tank ammunition is still imported. Even the 0.50 ammunition that is fired from the tank is still imported from Russia. So there are many webs which sort of prevent the transition from a government entity to a private entity. It is going to take some time. It's not going to happen by yesterday. That is why the first step in just sort of segregating them into 7 small compact breakdowns from 41 is definitely from the perspective of managing them well and decentralizing. That is something that we need to understand. The other side is that how do we actually evolve it is going to be something which is like on-the-job training. I gave you an example of the army-based workshops being put under GOKU, government-owned, company-operated. These did not take off. So, do we think that we have somebody who is willing to step forward? At least since 2011-12 onwards, the government has taken out n number of RFIs. Even in the year 2020, when we had the Chinese on the LSE poking us all over, the government took out RFIs requesting OEMs, including foreign OEMs, to partner with companies in India to manufacture ammunition which was immediately required. But all this was to be done by 31st of March this year. Nothing happened because the immediate response of a foreign OEM is that when you have a situation at your borders, you remember us and you want to do things by yesterday. You want our technology free of cost. You don't want to pay for it. So no OEM really comes forward. Then comes in the gray market, where people fall back to their earlier contacts or suppliers who say, if you want this, it has to be at a certain cost. Ammunition factories work with orders which go about 2 years in advance. So when you're stopping somebody else's supply and the OEM has to pay liquidity damages to that particular buyer, he puts that charge onto the government of India. Plus, he escalates his profit margin. Now, these are some nitty-gritties which we all have to understand, which goes on in the entire spectrum of the supplies that happen to the defense services. And it is not limited to arms and ammunition only. It is the entire thing. It is like running your household. I mean, whatever you require in your household is required by the defense services to operate in the field area.
Right.
So it's a very complex thing. It's not easy. And to say that we should not move forward in that direction is also not right. We have to move in that direction, but we also have to improve upon the processes and structures to ensure that the middlemen, the corruption, and other issues are sort of cut to the bone and removed. That's the only way forward for us.
Right, sir. So the last word before we go to the next segment, because we'll have to take a break after that, I want to give to Murthy Saab. See, our theme for this program is tooth to tail preparedness for deterrence. Now, with this, a lot of issues will come. We have a challenge of indigenization on one end, which definitely these ordnance factory boards are one of the largest indigenizations I would say, process for India for buying from locally, and make in India kind of thing. On the other side, the government itself has been pitching make in India. So yes, as Lieutenant Colonel says, that we need to go forward, not stall this. But then the gray areas still remain. As he rightly said, he also put that there's a gray area of the future progress, how it takes shape. Murthy Saab, your last word before we go to the next segment on other issues of Make in India.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's quite interesting. Who is the customer for these products is basically Government of India and the Defense Forces. That means we have got only one customer for these. So all these factories have to produce for the Government of India Defense Forces. If you get into that part, and as Khazanchi Saab and Srikumar said, based on Kallan Saab's introduction in the initial stages, the privatization is a long way. It's not recommended at the present time of thing for the defense sector, because we know what we are doing, what is our enemies and everything. And as far as public sector, if you make it a public sector, yes, public sector undertakings are the better one to manage these production units, much better than any of the private sector. Because the quality, the cost, everything is required to be under control for a government produced factory, and which is not possible in a private sector factory. The private sector would like to demand a particular price. We are seeing today in the case of vaccines, if you are depending on 2 vaccine pillows, they are defining the prices. So same thing will happen if you privatize the defense sector also. Then government has to pay what they are demanding. Another this point also needs to be considered when you are planning about privatization of the defense sector production units. So that's where most importantly, India is not ready, in my opinion, as Khazanchi Saab said and Srikumar said. Today, we still not ready to privatize the defense sector parts, and it may need some more time before we really go for privatization of the defense sector. It's more important that we are able to make it more efficiently. That's the improve the processes and make it more effective, increase the production. That's what is required in these systems, which can come with a more professionalized setups in these things, more centralized 7 units only. That will give you more better understanding than privatization. That's what basically the summary of this session as we have gone through. And I think for defense, Make in India is much smaller piece. As Kallan Saab has said, we are still importing most of the ammunition. So there is no point in looking into all those things. So that's what my opinion. Privatization has to wait in defense sector. That's what I personally feel.
Yeah, so we have come to the
I
end
would
of
just like to add a few things.
Yeah, sir.
So you see, what everybody is saying is very correct. Why we are not really progressing forward is there are new companies which are wanting to come up, and they're all startups.
Right.
So I did, as I shared in my last article which I wrote, I did mention this, that the archaic clauses which are there, that you should have been in existence for last 3 years. You should have supplied to the government of India an order of worth so many crore rupees over the last so many years. You should have land and plant and machinery worth so much in your own name. Now, these are restrictive clauses which have been put in by various people over the years to ensure that no new competitor steps in. The moment you remove this, there are people who are willing to take risk, ensure delivery, ensure quality control, and everything else. Let me assure you, gentlemen, I have worked on the project of making ammunition in India. The machinery, the wherewithal, the market, everything is brought to the table, but at a price. But as I said, getting licenses, use of political influence to ensure that license is not granted to the competitors is very much prevalent even today. Why do you think India has to go back to the grey market to procure items? It is because it is controlled. Yeah, so I by and large wanted to state this just as a follow-up to what everybody else said.
We'll continue this. We'll continue again. So I want to close this session by saying that overall, our entire panel is on one agreement that we have to go forward, but we need to also exercise some kind of caution to come towards a complete privatization, because there's nothing great that private sector will only deliver. These are styles of management. There is a public sector style of management. There's a private sector style of management. And there's also a cooperative sector, which is not under discussion in the defense issues, defense production issues. But surely the public and private sector, there needs to be a kind of a synergic participation and competition amongst themselves. With this, we move on to the next section, where we are going to discuss the Make in India objectives and the